Since 2018, the iPad Pro has been a hardware masterpiece, giving us one of the sleekest looking Apple designs ever and packed to the brim with hardware that made the Macs at the time look like a poor value. Well, now in 2022, the Mac has finally caught up to the iPad Pro's hardware with a great design, an excellent display, and chips that are just as efficient and in some cases more powerful than their iPad counterparts. And Apple is feeling the pressure. iPad sales are down while the Mac is booming. And with the iPad experience still so heavily reliant on old paradigms of iOS, this may be Apple's last chance to give us something with the next generation iPad Pro that really gives it a stark advantage over picking a Mac. So for this video, I want to focus not only on the hardware rumors for the next generation iPad Pro and how that could help give it an advantage over the Mac, but also focus on some of the software improvements that are rumored to come to iPadOS 16 and some changes that I think Apple should make to get more people to pick their iPad as their next computing device. First, let's start with the hardware rumors, because listen, if you picked up an iPad Pro in 2018, over the past 4 years, the outward design has barely changed, making upgrading to a new version way less desirable than it would be if it had a new design. Now, while there won't be a major redesign for the iPad Pro per se, thankfully there are some rumors talking about kind of a new design element for the iPad Pro, but it would basically just be a slight redesign, with Mark Gurman from Bloomberg reporting that Apple is working on an iPad Pro that would feature a glass back instead of an aluminum one. However, recent reports from 9 to 5 Mac indicate that Apple will not be making the entire back glass, and instead, they will be making the Apple logo larger on the iPad Pro and making only that part of the device made of glass, while the rest of the iPad Pro would still remain aluminum for increased durability and because aluminum is a lighter material than glass. The main purpose of this glass-backed Apple logo would be to add MagSafe charging as a feature onto the iPad Pro and possibly act as another way to incorporate additional MagSafe accessories into the iPad ecosystem. Sadly, this is the only rumored area for a new design, and it's really not a major change. What I would really like to see, and what I think would make iPads even more desirable of an upgrade for people using older models, is to make the bezels even smaller than they are on the current iPad Pros. I've seen a lot of concepts with full screen iPads, and I think they look pretty sharp. I also think that for future iPad ideas, Apple should implement two bigger size options. One 12-inch iPad replacing the 11-inch version, so not a 12.9-inch iPad, but just a 12-inch model, and then also a new 14-inch model. By making the bezel smaller, they could still fit these bigger screens into rather small enclosures, and I think a 12-inch size iPad Pro would be a really sweet spot for a productivity device that has a big enough screen for using not only as a tablet, but also as a laptop-like alternative with enough space for multitasking, as I just feel like the 11-inch is a little bit too cramped when multitasking, and I feel like the 12.9-inch is way too big as a tablet. So I think that 12-inch size would really hit the sweet spot for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people watching this video. I would also like to see mini LED displays on both iPad Pro versions. However, current rumors seem to indicate that even for this year, there is a chance that the 11-inch version of the iPad Pro will not be updated to a mini LED display, and it will remain an exclusive feature on the 12.9-inch version. Other changes are more obvious. Because Apple put the M1 chip into last year's iPad Pro, it is expected that for this year, in 2022, the iPad Pro will come with an M2 chip, and it should feature the same rumored 8-core CPU and 10-core GPU design as what we would find in these rumored futured M2 Macs. I don't know why I messed that up, but I did, and we're keeping it in. One big upgrade might actually have to do with battery life, with 9 to 5 Mac reporting that Apple is planning to increase the battery capacity on this year's iPad Pros to give them even longer battery life, especially when connected to the Magic Keyboard, which can cause more battery drain than when using the iPad Pro without it. But yeah, those are the only hardware changes that are really rumored for the 2022 iPad Pro, and as you can probably tell, those changes aren't a lot. But the hardware of the iPad Pro really isn't where these devices are lacking. It's in the software. And what Apple really needs to fix for the M2 iPad Pro, and quite frankly all iPad Pros, is the software, with a new version of iPadOS 16 debuting in less than a month at this year's WWDC. And Last-minute patent leaks are actually making this really, really exciting because Apple may be about to change the game completely with an Apple patent showing a new keyboard accessory that would dock the iPad Pro into what looks like a more traditional MacBook keyboard body, kind of like the Microsoft Surface Book. Now, while this hardware accessory would make a good laptop-like iPad, it's the next patent that is the most important because it basically shows a macOS style user interface with a finder, a complete desktop interface, and dragging applications and files onto the desktop, and most importantly, windowed applications. This would be a big shift for the iPad, and it would make it even more of a hybrid device than it already is. Combining iOS with macOS could be the strategy that Apple needs to turn this into a device that people pick as their main computing device. And I have to be honest, as someone who has always thought macOS on the iPad was kind of the wrong solution, if we have a hybrid operating system and can pick and choose between either iOS or macOS, it may be the only viable alternative unless Apple is willing to truly make a brand new iPad OS that is completely detached from iOS, using brand new ideas and all of that. And I kind of feel like Apple just doesn't have the will to do that at this point because the market share is just too low. And now that the iPad and Mac are literally running the same chips, this should be an easy system to incorporate into the iPad, letting users choose between iPadOS and macOS at any time. And if this is the only way to get Pro apps on the iPad, like Final Cut Pro or Logic, then this choice is better than keeping iPadOS where it currently is, which is not fully utilizing the power of the amazing Apple Silicon chips that are inside of them. Other leaks and reports indicate that even without this new hardware and software keyboard combo, that Apple is working on a new user interface for iPadOS that would be able to support windowed apps. In fact, when iPadOS 15 came out, I said that Apple should add windowed apps into the iPadOS, perhaps by borrowing the same windowed user interface that you can already use on the new Quick Notes feature. Being able to window any app on your iPad would be a big boost to multitasking capabilities, and it would make the iPad Pro a much better device for managing Pro workflows. I also think that Apple should add some other features like multi-user support that would make using these devices not only better in households with multiple people in them, but also in the workforce where, well, sometimes you really have to share computing resources. Changes like these could go a long way into making the iPad Pro a more Pro-like device, for lack of a better term. And I really want to see the iPad push back against the major upgrades that we have seen with the Mac for the last 2 years. I said it in my 1 month later review of the iPad Air. These products are so capable with their hardware, and the only major things keeping the iPad as being my main device is the software. The iPad is no longer the third device that sits between the iPhone and the Mac, and it's taken on even more responsibility in most people's computing world. So the software should change to reflect its increased use as people's main devices. And I think the iPad's main success is by making people choose that device over using a Mac, or more importantly, over using a Windows laptop, rather than having to buy 2 expensive devices, which most people just don't want to do at this point. All right, if you like this video, give me a like. If you want to see more, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.